Hey, Brass Facts here. Actually, since the origin name of this channel is like Brass Tacks, shouldn't my intro be, hey, it's time to get down to Brass Facts? Yeah, I don't know. Note, this will be a sort of shorter review because, to be frank, I don't want to spend 4 months, thousands of rounds reviewing this thing, because to me, it's pretty simple. Aimpoint Duty has a pretty good track record, durability, quality, all this stuff, right? It's a known brand, it's a known name. The reality is, what people are asking, what the question is, how does it do feature-wise, and how does it compare to other products in the Aimpoint lineup? The big question for me is, how does the Aimpoint Duty... Okay, I'm going to stop. How does the Aimpoint Duty do compared to the Aimpoint Pro, or how does it do compared to the Aimpoint T2? Put another way, is the Aimpoint Duty a Aimpoint Pro with a superior body, or is it a cheaper T2? Why is this analogy important? Well, the Aimpoint Pro has been a bedrock for the individual or police department for some time now that wants the best chance as an optic working out of the box now and into the future for a non-stupid price point, right? Not saying T2s aren't worth their price or they aren't worth their price, just saying sometimes something at a cheaper price point is nice. Something like an Aimpoint Pro, MSRP'd for around $450, you can get them for $400 or maybe even less. This guy comes in at about $500, we'll probably see it at about $450 or less. The second comparison, is this a T2 but for cheaper, right? Lower quality parts but similar performance. For the uninitiated, the T2 is actually not just an expensive rock solid red dot sight. It is a sight that is renowned for its excellent battery life. The Pro doesn't have outstanding battery life. It's excellent Eotech-esque night vision performance, and yeah, well, that's it. It's a red dot sight. There's only so much you can cram in there. So that'll be the big question. Before we're going any further, let's quickly see what you get with the Duty. You get your standard, albeit slightly different, T2-esque looking body design. This one has like a rough exterior that attracts dust like crazy but is fine for function. On the other side, we have our standard 2032 battery housing. It comes with covers that I immediately chucked away. That is a clear rear cover and a blocked out front cover. So you can do that weird occluded shooting that Aimpoint thinks anyone does. It comes with 4 night vision settings and 6 daylight settings, so identical to the Aimpoint Pro. It is waterproof. The Duty comes in at 5.5 ounces, which is a hair heavier than the 4.6 you'll see on the T2, and a lot less than this boat anchor of an optic, the Aimpoint Pro, which comes in at 13 ounces, give or take. It's got a 2 MOA standard dot, so good stuff there. Parallax seems insignificant, about on par with other offerings. At 100 yards, if you pin the dot, you'll probably miss a very small target, right around at the 4 to 6 MOA range. Instead of a integrated rheostat like this, or like the Aimpoint T2 where you rotate this, you get this weird, very small button that is almost integrated and you can easily press both at the same time. I'm pretty sure this exists for some reason, so they could repeatedly say on their advertising, it's slimline and flush. But these buttons end up being quite bad in practice, and if you have gloves on, this is kind of a nightmare. The mount. Alright, I don't know what happened here. Yeah, I don't know either. I guess T2 mounts are expensive to make, though this does not look particularly cheap. It is a T2 style, so you can take these out and put it on your own T2 mount. Does it work? Yeah, but it's got a number of minor issues. Number one, you gotta use a Torx bit to fasten it. Okay, cost savings. You have to also use a Torx bit to adjust zero, which is getting pretty annoying in this day and age. Why not include caps that you can adjust with it? Or, if you want a slimline design, why not make it like a flathead or something like that, so we can use bullet casings to emergency adjust in the field if you realize you've lost zero or want to just change zero on the spot. I don't understand the need for a tool for adjusting zero. Is it a huge issue? No, but it just seems like an unneeded design choice, right? The optics height is also a bit weird. I'm just going to cheat and use T-Rex arms here. He did all the homework for this. But essentially, it ends up As a combination, this ends up at a hair under 1/3 co-witness. That's partially the optic being a taller optic, right? And the mount being a shorter mount. And result, you end up with a optic at just under 1/3 co-witness. If you combine this, so the duty, with a standard height mount, so let's say a 1/3 mount, you'll get an optic that is significantly higher than 1/3 because of how this is designed. Once again, I'm cheating. I'm using T-Rex's arm stuff here. Hopefully no one's too upset about that. Moving on, this optic has blue tint. In practice, I don't think this ends up being a massive issue. The internet likes to chalk this up as an utter failure because this is noticeably blue. Like T-Rex arms video blue. But shooting it, I didn't really notice an issue until I actually referenced the footage later and people were like, damn boy, that's blue. When you're shooting both eyes open, it fades away into nothing. Furthermore, the Aimpoint Duty, while not being particularly dim per se, it is daylight bright. It is barely daylight bright. That is, you need to max out the brightness setting when you're in a very bright day. Hence why I think the aggressive blue tint, also known as a notch filter, exists. It was to get this red dot to get to the point where it actually is considered daylight bright in very bright conditions. Yeah, this tint was absolutely required to make the duty functional. But it's sort of a bummer, as you'd imagine, right? Because you need the notch filter to get to acceptable brightness level, which is annoying, right? Something like a Trijicon RMR gets well above that required brightness level. This is a useful feature to have because as your battery begins to die, you can actually increase the brightness and increase the power draw such that you can continue functioning at a brighter level and your optic doesn't dim to nothing. Now obviously you can solve this with administrative battery swapping, but let's be real, it doesn't always play out like that. Speaking of the battery, how is the battery? I can't say for sure. I've only had this for a short amount of time, but let's do some intuition here. The Aimpoint Pro states it has 30,000 hours on setting 7, which is, setting 7 is the middle of the brightness daylight settings, right? So right in the middle. That is way too dim to be functional. That being said, the same page, almost the exact same verbiage, is used to describe the Aimpoint Duty, and it says, setting 7 gives you 30,000 hours. Once again, that's the middle setting and it's not bright at all. So if you put this on setting 8 or setting 9, both of which are quite usable, but by no means nuclear bright, you'll find far less battery life. So because these both say the exact same thing on their page, I know the battery life on this one, setting 7 or setting 8 or setting 9 will give you about 7 months of constant on. Not quite 30,000 hours. So I suspect the duty will be somewhere within the battery range of the Aimpoint Pro, 7 months. Once again, it's a bit annoying that we have this aggressive as hell notch filter. The brightness isn't really that bright, and then the battery life is also not that great. There is some minor distortion, lensing, whatever you want to call it. If you wobble it back and forth aggressively, you'll notice it. Most red dots on the planet have this. It's not that big of a deal in my opinion. Magnifier performance. This is one of those things where unfortunately I can't speak to it with any degree of authority. I did shoot this with a magnifier. However, I have astigmatism, so what looks clear under a magnifier or a red dot to me is not necessarily what looks clear under a magnifier or by itself to you. I did notice this looks better under a magnifier than the Aimpoint Pro, which is considered not great under a magnifier. I also find optics that are apparently bad under a magnifier look really good under a magnifier for me, so I can't really speak there with any kind of confidence. Night vision performance. How'd it do? This is the big question for a lot of people. Can we get T2 performance under night vision for essentially $300 to $400 less? Because this does come with a mount. Well, the footage is on a moonless night because for me, honestly, night vision performance, night vision passive performance specifically, in a brightly lit environment is meaningless. Everything looks good under these environments, including Holostons that don't even have real NV settings. So, we're on a moonless night. How does it do at roughly 30 yards? Note, this is relative to performance. Cameras don't understand or function well with night vision. So understand it's relative performance. This is not actually how it looks like. As you can see, the Pro and the Duty are basically the same in performance. from being there personally and having someone else check it out as well. To the eye, the Duty is actually slightly better than the Pro because of the body design being a much smaller profile, combined with the lens clarity, or I guess the transmission rate being slightly higher. You end up, and this is only after going back and forth, you only get a slight performance gain on the Aimpoint Pro. Like I said, the body kind of helps it fade away into nothing, right? So you just see a floating dot, and the lens clarity is ever so slightly clearer. But at the end of the day, it's like 10%. It's not very much. But when you bring in an Eotech, it just blows both of them out of the water. Note, I don't have a T2, but Eotech is generally considered to be a comparable metric to a T2, right? So neither of these, and we're talking about the Duty, compare to an Eotech, which is roughly similar to a T2. There is one aspect that this is really cool about, but it is somewhat misleading. If you have dual tubes, you'll find that this thing looks really clear, and this one doesn't look so good. But that is mostly because this has such a small body that if you have dual tubes on, you'll actually begin to occlude shoot, right? The image of your off eye will overlay, and it will look amazing. But it's worth noting, and a lot of people have mentioned this, but it's worth noting, when you're occluded shooting, you're going to have close to a 3-inch plus offset, so that is not indicative of good passive performance. That is just occluded shooting doing occluded shooting things. In closing, let's get down to that thing from earlier, brass tacks. Let's get down to brass tacks. Is the Aimpoint Duty a cheap T2? No. In all the regards that matter, this does not hold a candle to an Aimpoint T2. Is this an Aimpoint Pro that was shrunk down to kind of approximate a T2 body? Yeah, sort of, to a degree. Is this a game changer? No. The button placements, the button design, kind of the quasi-rocker design, the mount design, the requirement for a tool to adjust zero, the odd mount height consideration. So if you're going to go with an aftermarket mount height, you kind of have to do some weird stuff that make it less intuitive. The blue tint combined with really no extra brightness gained, the middling to mediocre battery life, etc. All of these in isolation, yeah, whatever, not a big deal, who cares? But when you combine it all together, and considering it's 2022, this comes together to create a very average, mediocre package. Either most of these designs were kind of made with the very specific goal of creating the package as slim as possible and as aerodynamic as possible, which is sort of what they're getting at on their product description page with constant terms like no snag hazard and stuff like that. But who exactly was having snag issues with T2 designs? Anyone? No? Or Aimpoint intentionally tried to mirror the Aimpoint Pro stats, but intentionally cut things such that it did not compete with the T2 sales for both night vision and non-night vision users alike, which feels a lot more likely. After all, I suspect a lot of people don't actually buy Aimpoint T2s for night vision usage, even though that on paper that is its defining standout feature. Thus, this thing gets little weird quirks to kind of isolate it and make it not a T2. So yeah, it's kind of a shitty product, right? No, it's not. It's fine. It's really hard to put a line in the sand here because either the phrase, hey, Aimpoint Pro but in a T2 body gets you all excited and makes you want to buy one, or you think you see that and you're like, so what? And that's really that. This has a niche. It's just a very uninspired and boring niche. My only disdain with this is kind of like, man, this thing could have come out 4 years ago, and 4 years ago this wouldn't have even been a trendsetter, right? It just would have been the default choice over an Aimpoint Pro. This will sell because Aimpoint, and I'm not saying that in a derogatory fashion, buying a fleet of these for your department or for personal use, right? I talked about this in my Aimpoint Pro video. It makes sense to sometimes want to spend a little bit more for a nicer product, right? For guarantees, functionality out of the box, that little bit of extra comfort. I don't think anyone believes that a Holosun is on par in that regard compared to an Aimpoint, and for some people that is important, and some people just don't give a shit, right? They test their gear and it doesn't matter, right? And most people are still not passive aiming or even have night vision, so maybe that doesn't matter as much. Who knows? But yeah, that's really it. Some brass facts, if you will. Thanks for watching. Also consider perhaps joining Subscribestar to get access to a podcast where me and Hop discuss random things, occasionally guns. Well, generally it is guns, but we get drunk and off topic, so occasionally we make some sense, sometimes we don't. It also primarily helps to support the channel because, contrary to what people say, gun tubers are not just overflowing with money. This is a tough thing. It's entirely a passion-driven project. But, keep commenting, keep interacting. All that stuff is good fun too, so don't worry about it if you don't feel like it. Anyway, maybe I'm going about it with the completely wrong strategy. Do it for the dog!
I'll trim your bushes for treats.
Nova, you got one down and a couple more to go. Oh my god, she's just going.
Really wants that stick.
Nova, you like that one? Okay, I should go before I die of hypothermia.